good evening to everyone. I see a lot of seniors in the audience and some familiar faces. Thank you, Mohit ji, for giving me this opportunity. I feel it's quite by serendipity that I'm speaking after Atul sir and Amita ma'am, because they've touched on Bhagavad Gita and the concept of pain and pleasure and conquering not just mountains but their own selves. And I think that this fits in very beautifully like a sequel to what they have just spoken through their own adventures. So this is the book that I'll be speaking on. This is my second book by the same author, Susan Cain. She's a Jew. I need to mention a little bit about the author to tell you where this is coming from. So she lost her ancestral, paternal and maternal grandfather in the entire collateral in the Holocaust. And that is how part 3 of the book also talks of whether, apart from the body carrying trauma, do we, as part of the epigenetics in our genome system, also carry a collective pain of our ancestors? And that is a question that gets answered in the book. This has come out in 2022, so it is absolutely latest. Her first book came out in 2019. It's called Quiet, The Power of the Introverts in a World Which Can't Stop Talking. And I think it is something which needs to be read. I know I have met a gentleman here who is a parenting coach, and I think these are life skills that I have acquired through books which were not taught, just still not taught in schools and homes, and are very, very important. Because if a child is not groomed well, parented well, brought up well, he has different kinds of attachment styles, and that speak through in the kind of relationships, personal or professional, that he ends up building. Both her books, in fact, became very, very important for me. It was very educative, especially I came to know about what introverts are and how one needs to, have a language to speak to them, to understand them. Very often in schools, the introvert kid doesn't get the kind of attention that is required. But now coming back to this book, so pain and pleasure, as Mohitji was also saying, as I understand from this book and from my own life, are kind of conjoined at the hip. We live not just in a metaverse of Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, but we also live in a world in which pain and pleasure are simultaneous. You can laugh when you are grieving, and you can grieve tears of joy when you are happy. So it is very, very simultaneous. So we have a small meta-universe of our own being. And that is how Bittersweet has come about, because life is not sweet, life is not bitter, it is somewhere in between. And this book is all about that in between. How this book tries to address very fundamental questions. See, I'm also interested in astronomy and astrology deeply. And I have this something called the girdle of melancholy. And like in the Ayush system of medicine, you have what is called Vat, Pip and Kaph kind of body that you have. So Aristotle spoke about the 4 humors that we have. And melancholy is one of the humors, which basically means dwelling in sorrow, in melancholy, a melancholy state of being. You're born with it. Then there are other states of being which are sanguine, phlegmatic. Sanguine is basically the opposite of sorrowful, if you can say, the happy state. Phlegmatic is the calm state, and the choleric is the aggressive, the angry state. None of us are totally in one state, but we are mixtures of these kind of states. And at certain points in time, we all love sad songs. At some point in time, we want to fall in love. But we don't want sadness to engulf us all the time. So it's like Bhagat Singh Pehna to ho but baaju wale ghar mein. Why there is a paradox of tragedy, that while we want to listen to the Irish music or the jazz or the ghazals, but we also don't want that sorrow to grip us. So this book is divided into 3 parts. It tells you the basic idea of why we should read this book is one, that how to be comfortable in the state, first to understand and become aware of what kind of state that you have, what kind of humor do you carry inside of you, what is your body made of, what does it integrally or naturally or organically align with. Are you the sunflower that faces the sun, or are you the magnet that attracts patients or people who are sorrowful. In my own life, I've observed that I get attracted to people who have undergone some kind of trauma, some kind of sadness, and I have friends whom I've known for donkeys of years, and we've bonded because of either some upcoming trauma in their life where I was a friend and they could just come back to me. So there is a pattern that I've observed in my life. So this book became very, very valuable for me. So the first part of the book talks of what does sorrow do to you once you become comfortable. And it's not just sorrow in a physical sense. It can just be some kind of deep longing. In Spanish, there's a word called duende. It says it's a deep kind of a longing. It can be a longing for travel. It can be a yearning. So basic idea is you long to belong, not just to fit in. So first part talks of what can sorrow do to you once you become comfortable. Because as human beings, we only do things that bring us some kind of advantage. And we are very calculative as human beings. We only think of what is this job going to give me in terms of. So this book tells you that from sorrow you can transcend and you can connect, you can create, you can utilize your sorrow, you can utilize your pain to become a fuel to grow in life. So just like grieving will always be there, can you grow through grieving? Or can you grow around grieving? So that first part talks of that. It is a very well-researched book. So it has got research on one side, it has got anecdotes from famous people's lives of how they underwent and how they became who they were because of the kind of background. So if you look at Newton, if you read people's childhood stories, and this is something which has attracted me recently after looking at the various attachment styles that people follow in relationships, you find that not just ikigai, but also what you underwent, how you were parented in childhood, tells you how you will become in your adult, how you relate to people, whether you will have an anxious relational style, whether you will have an avoidant style, or whether you will come from a very, very secure style. So the first 4 chapters of the book talk about that, about the research on sorrow, about how you can transcend from sorrow, how you can belong. The second part, and the first part is called sorrow and longing. It puts sorrow and longing in the correct perspective because we've usually normalized what is called the tyranny of the tyranny of positivity. Every time, we are doing this talk after the lockdown, and in the lockdown we've seen losses in every family and also a lot of collective pain. One thing I realized during the lockdown is that we really don't know how to be a good caregiver and what is the language of caregiving. When you talk to people who are grieving, mourning somebody's death, how do you talk to them? How do you tell them? How do you do therapy for people who are in their old age or feeling isolated, doubled by the lockdown that happened? So I had a mom who was absolutely alone in Bombay, and she felt very isolated given the fact that she was a social butterfly and doing a lot of things, and she was totally confined to a house. So how do you talk to her? How do you comfort her so that your words carry some meaning? How do you build individuals, and how do you build your office work culture and culture of societies and nations? So the second part of the book actually talks about that and says that moving on is not the same. Moving forward is not the same as moving on. And you can move forward with all your grief, and you can laugh. So when you see all these news items on deaths that happen, famous deaths where Hollywood participates, and you say, oh my God, and recently there was a news item where you said that, oh my God, this gentleman, this singer died, KK, and they were saying that the daughters and the wife are laughing, it's atrocious. So this book also tries to explain that during the grief, you can also laugh during grief. It's not, nobody has to have value judgment of what you do. So grief is not some kind of a point of event. It is a range, and you are allowed to pass through that stage in life. Also in work cultures, we have Shubrata, who's a very dear friend, and she's written a book on depression. And we had a conversation with her, and she will totally understand. And I say this because when WHO says that in the next decade, mental health and anxiety will overtake diabetes and cancer to be the number 2 disease in the world, which will require a lot of skilling. And these are soft skills. People who parent, who deal with parenting children and who deal with parenting or even relationship coaches, I think we will all need to acquire this. So I think part 2 talks of what kind of office culture. It also talks of something very interesting, that an angry boss, a leader, so it says an angry leader, a person who's angry, can have positional power, can use the effect of the kursi to get things done. But a person who might be a melancholic person might actually have a lot of influential power over people and get more loyalty from the staff and employees because of the fact that his emotional valuing in his own emotions allows him to connect with people better than, say, an angry boss who is able to give more tasks than being a team leader. Part 3 of the book, and all this while when she's talking of part 1 and part 2, she's also talking of her own personal issues that she had with her mother. And she says something very interesting in the book, and she says that the sins of her parents need not impact us. We can connect with our parents, or for that matter anybody else, without the pain. She did not have a very good relationship with her mother because her mother had a very, very difficult childhood from the fact that there were a lot of tragedies from the Holocaust that impacted her mother as a child, and that traveled in her. So she was carrying a lot of accumulated grief and a lot of accumulated trauma. So the last, and all this while she also describes her own journey. So the last part of the book actually talks of the whole process of grieving, the impermanence of life, and the fact is that we can overcome everything and convert the bittersweet of a life into creativity and connection. And I think that is where I found the meat of this book. And she also talks of giving her own example of the family, of how they were able to transcend the trauma and move from Poland to come to America and start afresh. Because triggers from your past can get triggered at a certain point. Motherhood can trigger something that you did not receive from your mother at a certain point in time when you have your own child. So these are things that she talks about. I think if you like poetry, and she also talks about attachment, love with attachment and love without attachment. And she says to be able to love your children for who they are is love without attachment, and to be able to love your children because they are children is love with attachment. You'll grieve more for your own child, but you'll also grieve for the death of somebody else's child. But the moment you are able to understand that your love, the circle of love, of attachment continues to grow, something like maybe Mother Teresa I can think of at this point in time, then you are kind of overcoming and making bittersweet of your sorrow and of your own personal grief. By walking everybody home is how you walk yourself, is what I've learned from this book. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity of actually talking back to myself important moments from this book, which in the process of sharing with you, I'm actually reminding myself